Okay, so I grew up as a white boy in the suburbs of Sydney at a time when multiculturalism had only just really started to happen in Australia. I didn't come into contact with Buddhism until I was a teenager. And the first meditation retreat I ever did was free and by donation. And this was kind of shocking in a way. I came from a world where everything had a monetary value, where things cost, user pays. And when it came time to donate for the accommodation and food, where people had an opportunity at the end of the retreat to donate, I found there was so much joy in my heart that I was participating in something that was truly beautiful and giving other people the opportunity in the future to practice and benefit just as I had from that experience. And then later on, as I became more and more interested in Buddhism and started to interact more and more with Buddhist communities, I discovered that that kind of generosity wasn't the exception, but it was the norm. And I was blown away by people's kindness. I was staggered at people's generosity. I had never seen that kind of activity before. Sure, you know, my family, they weren't religious, we didn't go to church or anything like that, but we would once in a while perhaps donate if someone came knocking at the door, like the Salvation Army. I think my parents maybe had a few charities that they supported from time to time, but we didn't have a culture of generosity. The kind of generosity that my family practiced and the kind of generosity that's quite common in Western countries and perhaps all around the world is almost tribal or clannish generosity, where you give to people who you have a relationship with somehow, where maybe you expect something back. Family and friends, things like that. Christmas, you know, we have 1 or 2 times a year, birthdays and Christmas, maybe we'll give some gifts. So this was the kind of culture that I grew up in. So when it came to experiencing generosity in Buddhism, I found it really inspiring. I wonder if people who grew up in Buddhist culture have become a little bit blasé, a little bit inured about doing generosity as a practice. For me, it was something new and exciting, and I could really get into it. I loved it. I felt the result in my heart of being generous and kind. It was truly a liberating practice for me. Sometimes though, if we come from cultures where we practice generosity as a matter of course, sometimes we might begin feeling a bit obliged or obligated, or we might become a little bit bored with our practice of generosity. It might start to become a little bit meaningless to us. And so today I wanted to talk about reinvigorating our practice of generosity and to demonstrate how we can use it in our meditation practice. The first thing to understand is that generosity is one of the core and most basic practices taught by the Buddha. When he met an audience for the first time, he would talk about generosity. And the reason for this is that generosity is something that benefits not only you, but also benefits others. Generosity is something that helps us to let go of stuff. The spiritual path is all about letting go. Generosity is a practice that removes the stain of miserliness, selfishness, greed from your mind. Meditation, generosity is something that allows us to let go of this sense of self, me, mine, my stuff, my wealth. Instead, we practice letting go and sharing with others. When we practice generosity, we're not thinking about ourselves, we're thinking about others. And yet the Buddha said that the practice of generosity benefits us. Can you see that in your own practice? Can you see that you're getting something out of it? I hope so. Yeah, otherwise it's just like you're obliged to do it. It's an expectation. You're being forced into it, peer pressured into it. And if that's the case, then you might get some benefit, of course, but you won't get the kind of benefit that the Buddha talked about when he talked about the benefits that come from generosity. So he said that we should not be afraid of doing meritorious deeds, such as generosity. We shouldn't be afraid of making merit. He said it's as a result of the merit that he made by doing things like acts of generosity in the past. It's a result of such meritorious deeds that he became the Buddha, that he was able to achieve this incredible act of enlightenment. And in the process of enlightenment, he saw the results of people's activities. He saw that people who were kind and generous had good results. He saw that people who are kind and generous went to the heavenly realms. And so he says, don't be afraid of meritorious deeds. In another sutta, he talks about the power of doing meritorious deeds and the importance of practicing generosity. He said, if beings knew as I know, this is the Buddha talking, if beings knew as I know the power of meritorious deeds, they would never hesitate to share their food before eating. Even sharing a single grain of rice has incalculable merit. Incalculable. And he gave a simile to help us understand this. He said, imagine the ocean. When we talk about the ocean, we don't talk about how many litres of water are in the ocean. It's difficult to estimate, right? It's difficult to calculate just how much water is in the ocean. In the same way, he said, it's impossible to calculate the amount of benefit that comes from doing such a small act of merit as sharing a single grain of rice. He said the benefit is incalculable. All you can say is like we say about the ocean, there's a lot of water in the ocean, right? And he said there's a lot of merit in even that small deed. That this merit leads to bliss, heavenly bliss, and leads to rebirth in the Brahma world. And that person who practices generosity and kindness it will take them to the very end of the Buddhist path. They can become a once returner. They can become a non-returner. And eventually they will attain arahantship and full extinguishment. So this is the power of generosity, the power of merit-making. There's another story from the suttas, one of my favourite, is about Visakha. Do you know about this lay woman, Visakha, who was around at the time of the Buddha? She was foremost in generosity. The Buddha used to give out lists of people who were, they had particular skills or abilities, like, oh, this monk is really good at the Vinaya, this nun, she's great at teaching, and things like that. And there are also lists of lay people. And this woman, Visakha, she was the foremost laywoman in terms of generosity. She would always turn up with food and requisites for the monks and give. She loved giving. So she's famous actually for, in the Vinaya, the monks' rules, because at the rainy season, the monks would bathe outside naked. And she didn't think it was such a good look. So she asked for permission to give rainy season bathing cloths so that the monks could be covered and not naked in the rain. Anyway, so she once came along to the Buddha and she asked permission to give, I think, 8 different kinds of requisites. She wanted to give various robes, medicines, food. Isn't that nice? Like, do you mind if I give you requisites? Do you mind if I give the Sangha things? So it's quite wise. She asked permission first, like, do you want these things, right? And the Buddha said, yes, that's very kind of you. And then he said, but can you tell me why you want to give these things? And she said, well, then the monks will have clothes, then the monks will have medicine, and so it'll help them to practice, and that's good. And the Buddha said, no, what do you get out of giving this stuff? And it's kind of like a trick question, isn't it? You're not sure how to answer. You think, oh gosh, what would you say when you give something? What do you say? If I was to ask you, what do you get out of giving food to the monks when you come to the monastery? What do you get out of giving a donation? What would you say? Huh? Happiness, peace, yeah? Is it an investment for your future? Right? Yeah. Is it because you're feeling guilty about something? You think maybe you'll be more peaceful? Do you want to know what Visakha said? She said, when I give, I feel joy. So she goes away, she gives, she thinks about this later, she remembers, and she says, when I reflect upon my generosity, I feel joy in my mind. So that's pretty good, isn't it? Yeah? I mean, sure, it's not fireworks, but being joyful is pretty good, isn't it? Wouldn't you like to be joyful? I mean, even experiencing a little bit of joy is already pretty good, right? To have joy in your mind. How fortunate. Joy is hard to find in this world sometimes. But this is just the first thing. She said, I experience joy And that joy becomes piti. Do you know what piti is? Piti. Piti is like, sometimes it's translated as ecstasy or rapture. Sometimes it's translated as zest or thrill. Piti is the bodily and mental experience we experience in meditation, sometimes out of meditation. Maybe it's like a rush of tingles in the body, a shower of shivering, quivering goosebumps. Have any of you experienced piti in your meditation practice? It's like a kind of tremor of bliss in the body. And so this is called piti. So she says, I experience joy, and then this deepens and becomes rapture. So that's nice. And this continues. She said that rapture becomes kaya passaddhi. Kaya passaddhi is bodily tranquility. This is also such a beautiful stage of meditation. It's when the body just releases, opens up. Sometimes I describe it as being like letting the air out of a tire. The body lets go. The senses of the body are starting to turn off. We're experiencing joy and piti already in our meditation. We're starting to find where true happiness is. We're not so concerned about the outside world, and even this body. We don't need the senses so much. We've got our eyes closed. We're tuning in to what's going on inside our mind. We're moving inwards, away from sensory experience. And that's partially what's happening when we experience kaya passaddhi. We're allowing for our mental activity to become more important than our sensory world. And that's why the senses fade and the body relaxes. And this deepens and becomes bliss. Bliss. Sukha. Yeah. So this process, we have this act of generosity, then we have joy, gladness that arises in dependence on remembering or recollecting that act of generosity. That joy becomes rapture, thrill. That becomes kaya passaddhi, that bodily tranquility. This becomes bliss, sukha. And that bliss is so sweet and so rich, so delicious. Have any of you experienced bliss in your meditation practice? It's nice, right? Feels good. This is the kind of pleasure that we get from meditation, which we can't get from sensory pleasures. This comes from within, naturally, bubbles up inside of us. It's not like those other sensory pleasures outside in the world. Anyway, this is still just the beginning of the process that Visakha describes. So she was a woman who knew what she was talking about, right? She said, when I experience bliss, my mind becomes established in samadhi. That's stillness in meditation. So this is a very instructive journey. It's a journey of the mind that is moving through successively more pleasurable stages of the mind in meditation. So it begins with generosity. You get the joy coming up, deepening into the rapture. The body becomes tranquil. The mind experiences bliss. And it's that pleasurable sequence of events that draws the mind into samadhi, into stillness. We go through this process of mental states, each one abandoning the world outside, drawing the mind inwards, each one moving away from sensory experience towards a mental experience of happiness. And that process of successively more pleasurable mental states is what draws the mind into stillness, samadhi, deep meditation. And from that deep meditation of samadhi, Visakha says, that's when I can start to get some insight. She says she starts to see yatha bhuta jnana dasanam. She starts to see the nature of reality. She develops the 5 spiritual faculties and the 5 spiritual powers. And this leads to insight into the nature of reality. So this is almost like the end of the Buddhist path. The stages that she's describing are very, very high and very profound. And these arise from the simple act of giving. Sadhu to Visakha. She saw, right? She saw the power of generosity. This is why the Buddha also, when he talked about generosity, he wasn't just saying, be kind to the monks, make sure the monks eat. It's like, this is for your long-term benefit. This is for your long-term benefit, your long-term happiness. And this isn't something that I really understood until I had become a monk. The monks are a field of merit. We are like slow-moving targets for people's generosity. So in Australia, I do the practice of pindapata. You know pindapata? Where we go for alms round. So we do this on the streets in Sydney. And I'll never forget the first time I did this practice. It's incredibly moving, incredibly powerful. You turn up, you have no idea. You don't tell anyone where you're going. And you turn up and hopefully you'll eat. You'll eat because of other people's kindness, other people's generosity. And I'm happy to say that I've never ever gone hungry. Why? Because people are kind, people are generous. And this is a very beautiful thing to see from my side as a monk. And this is something that when you see it in others, you can also rejoice, right? When you see other people being kind and generous, you should rejoice. But I just mentioned a story. We met this, it's quite bizarre in Australia that I can do pindapata, right? I mean, it's not a Buddhist country. Sometimes Hindus, Muslims, Christians, random people and Buddhists put food into our bowls. And one day we met this random young girl. She's maybe about 18, 19. And she stopped us and she said, I don't know why, but I just want to give you something. And we were like, oh, that's very kind of you. And she's like, I don't have anything to give, but she gave us these rocks, like precious rocks, gems, not diamonds or anything, just like a shiny stone. And so, it's great. So she puts that into our bowls. Nice, yeah? And she said, but what are you doing anyway? And we said, oh, we're going for alms round. This is how we get our daily meal. And she said, are you hungry? Yes. Oh, here, take my banana bread. And she gave us her banana bread. She didn't know what we were. She had no idea what monks were. She had no idea what we were doing, but she just had this strong desire to give. And it's so beautiful. It's like there's this generosity that was lying dormant inside of her, just under the surface, looking for an opportunity to come out. And I think it's the same in all of us. We have this generosity inside of us, looking for an opportunity, looking for a target. And this is part of the job of the monks, that we are this target for people's generosity. And so for a monk or a nun, it's a very beautiful world that we live in, a bit of a kindness bubble, a generosity bubble, where we see people being kind and generous all the time. And my hope is that people are kind and generous when they're not around the monks and nuns as well, and that they get into the habit of generosity. And this is why when you come to a place like this, or you go on a retreat, or you're actually trying to get into the habit of being kind and generous. We're developing this generosity muscle. It has so many benefits for us, so many benefits for others. The benefits that it has for us, there's once a general who asked the Buddha, what is the benefit of generosity that I can see here and now? He wanted to know what he was getting out of it. And the Buddha said, okay, well, I'll give you a few benefits that you can see here and now. 4 benefits. The first is that you are loved. You are loved by people around you. When you are generous, people love you. That makes sense, doesn't it? Yeah, no one wants to hang out with a miser. No one wants to be around someone who's selfish. But you are loved. You become dear to many people. So when you practice generosity, people love you. It's beautiful, right? Second benefit is that you have a lot of friends. People want to be around you. People want to follow you. People want to associate with you, right? Because you're kind and generous. No one wants to hang out with the miser. Everyone wants to hang out with people who are kind and look after each other, right? So simple. Makes sense though. The third thing, you get a good reputation. Which is true, right? I'm thinking about all the people that I know who have been generous and kind, and I talk about it to others. I'll be like, oh, such and such came today and they gave so much, they're so kind. Or so-and-so comes to Pintapata and offers every day. We talk about people who are generous, right? They get a good reputation. We know who are kind and generous. So that's nice. People know that you're kind and generous. Another benefit is that you can go into any room and you can feel confident and at ease. When you enter a room with royalty, the Buddha said, when you enter the room with generals, when you enter a room with monks, whoever it is, you can feel confident and assured of yourself. The reason for this is that you feel good about yourself. You're a good person. You're a good person. You can feel happy in yourself, confident in yourself, knowing that you have given, knowing that you're a good person. Makes you feel assured of yourself. So wherever you go, you can be confident. So these are 4 benefits that the Buddha said that you can see here and now in your very life. Right now you can see these benefits in yourself and others. And then he said to the king, to the general, he said, there's one more benefit, which is that those people who are kind and generous will have a heavenly rebirth. And so the general said, yes, I can see this. You know, I can see I'm generous, I give, and I've got lots of friends, I'm loved. People want to hang out with me. They say I have a good reputation. I'm confident when I go into any assembly. And that last one, I'll take your word for it, right? And so it's said that when we practice generosity, it leads to heavenly rebirth. And this is one of the essential things that people must practice if they want to have a good rebirth, which is why people practice generosity, right? They want to make sure that they have a good rebirth, either in the human realm or in the heavenly realms. And when we chant, you've probably heard the monks doing the anumodana. Do you know what the word anumodana means? It's not a blessing. Sometimes it's translated as a blessing. So it sounds like the monks are giving you something. But we're not. We're reciting the anumodana, which means rejoicing along with your generosity. So we're reminding you of your good qualities. We're reminding you of how wonderful it is that you are a kind and generous person. This reminder is really important. I see so many of you, so many people doing acts of generosity without seeing you being happy and rejoicing in the moment. I'll talk more about that in a second. But the anumodana will say things like, Ayu wano sukhang balang. This is ayu. Ayu means long life. You get long life. Wano, good looks. And I'm looking around this room and I'm thinking, must be true. Good looks. Ayuwano, sukhang, bliss, happiness, balang, strength. And so this is something that occurs naturally when we give. These are the results that we can expect. They're not something the monks bestow upon you. These are results that come naturally from giving. And these are the things that the heavenly beings have as their qualities. Ayu, long life. The life of heavenly beings is very, very long. Eons sometimes. Wano, they're beautiful. These heavenly beings are beautiful. They experience sukhang, bliss. They dwell in blissful realms. Their entire world is blissful. Balang, and they're strong. And so these are the qualities associated with heavenly beings that result from giving. And that's why when we recite the anumodana, that we are reminding you not only of your acts of generosity, but of the kind of results that you can expect from being a kind and generous person. Which is nice, yeah? So when you've been kind and generous, what should you do? Actually, let's even just take a step back before you're being kind and generous, there should be an intention behind it, right? So you should feel inspired to give. This is really important. You want to make sure that you have this inspiration. If you don't have this inspiration, maybe you shouldn't give. If you don't feel inspired to give, then maybe you're being obliged or forced or shamed or pressured into giving. It's not quite the same, is it, as being inspired to give? When you think about it, this inspiration is kind of like love. It is about this, I want to do something for that person. I want to do something. I want to give them something that they need. I want to look after them. I want to predict their needs. This is kind of a little bit like love. So this is that inspiration that we need. We need to have that little spark of, I guess it's also this spark of joy. I know. I'll give them this thing. And the mind feels light and bright when it's inspired like that, doesn't it? If already is feeling good, already the mind is in a better place than when it doesn't have that inspiration. In a higher place, you're thinking about others, not yourself. And so we have that inspiration when we give, before we give. And then, in the moment of giving, we should feel glad and confident. Yes, this is good. I'm giving. You know, sometimes though when you give, you might be handing it over and you have moments of doubt. You're like, actually, I want this. Or, I don't know. You know, that's not how we want to feel when we give. We want to feel like, yes, I'm giving, good, glad, confident in that act of giving. We don't want to have that kind of hesitation and doubt, that kind of like, you know, fingers kind of grabbing it back. Actually, I'll keep it, thanks. No, that's not how we should give. And then after we give, we should feel satisfied. We should feel good about ourselves. Yes, I've been kind and generous. So these factors are important to have in the process of giving. If afterwards you've given something and you regret it, you should look into that. Why? Why do I feel regret about giving? Were they not an appropriate person to give to? Did I give the wrong thing? Do I have some feelings towards them that I haven't reconciled yet? And we should understand that when we have these factors present, then the giving will be really powerful. We won't have any doubts about this practice. And so we give. Later, we should reflect upon that act of generosity. So the Buddha said that this is essential. Don't just give and forget about it. Make much of it in your mind. Don't give without reflecting on why this is a spiritual practice and what benefit it can bring to yourself and others. Take the time to recollect. So this is the practice called Chaga Nussati. Chaga Nussati, the practice of recollecting your generosity. This is one of the 6 anussatis taught by the Buddha. 6 recollections. We have other recollections on sila, ethical conduct, or the devas. And of course, you'd be familiar with the Buddha Dhamma Sangha Anussati that we chant usually at the beginning of our practice. So these are recollections. It's not enough just to chant those. We have to ponder them, think about them, reflect upon them. And when we do this practice of Chaga Nusati, we recollect our generosity. And like Visakha, we'll see that dependent upon our act of generosity, when we recollect it, Chaga Nusati, this recollection of generosity, what happens? Joy arises in your mind. You feel it. It's like the mind changes gear. Suddenly, the mind kicks up a little bit into a higher state. Joy, gladness, pamoja. And then, what comes next? Piti, yeah. Rapture. You experience tingles and thrill in your mind. And then the kaya passaddhi, the bodily tranquility and the senses becoming withdrawn from the outside world. And then you get the bliss. The bliss is so good. Ajahn Brahm talks about the bliss that's better than sex, better than drugs. And it's kind of bliss that is so powerful and so moving. Feels so good. And that good feeling draws the mind deeper and deeper into samadhi, into stillness. So this is what we practice when we practice Chaga Nusati. Chaga Nusati. So it's not just some sort of like, oh yeah, I just think about my generosity. Oh yeah, it was good. No, it's a much deeper, a much more profound recollection. It's a real meditation that arises from your good actions. So in a few moments we're going to do a short session of Chaga Nusati. But before we do, I just want to share one beautiful image from the suttas about how we should practice generosity. And one of the things I haven't mentioned that I probably should is just to remind you that when we practice generosity, we're coming out of that miserliness, we're coming out of that stinginess, we're coming out of selfishness, we're coming out of meanness, we're becoming less like Scrooge and more like Visakha. We're not obsessed by hoarding our wealth. We want to give it away. We're not obsessed by what we get, gains and stuff. We're obsessed with what we can give to others and how we can benefit them. So you can see that this act of generosity is changing our mind, transforming our mind, purifying our mind from the defilements of selfishness, of greed, of ill will, of miserliness, helping us to see not self, understanding how we can let go of this me, my, I. And so this beautiful image that I want to share with you is something I often share because I think it's such a striking visual image. It's easy to remember and it helps us when we're conceptualizing our spiritual practice to have things that are easy to remember and are clear and potent. And so this is the image of a rain cloud. And you find this sutta in the Itivuttaka, in the Khuddaka Nikaya. And this is the image of a rain cloud. 3 types of rain cloud. The Buddha said that there's 3 types of rain clouds that we can compare to 3 types of people in this world. The first is a cloud that doesn't rain. So a cloud that doesn't rain, that's like someone who doesn't give, yeah? You know those clouds that don't rain? You see them in the sky. They're like these little lonely, small, pathetic little clouds. They don't rain. Just like people who don't give. These people are also small. Shallow. They're not full. So this is like someone, the Buddha said, who doesn't give, a cloud that doesn't rain. The next kind of cloud is the kind of cloud that rains locally. So it's a cloud that's got some water in it and gives some water, but it just rains in one spot. The Buddha said that this is like someone who gives locally. So if we think about this, is probably how we mostly give, right? We give locally, like we give to our friends and our family, or we give to our favourite charity, our favourite temple, right? You can see what makes the cloud rain locally, what makes that idea of local. It's like local to you, your friends, your family. These are what you give to. And so probably this is how we mostly practice. And so this is obviously better than not giving at all, right? So this is something to celebrate. These people are giving. And so this is like a cloud that rains locally. But the best kind of cloud is the kind of cloud that rains everywhere. The Buddha says this is like those giant clouds in the rainy season. Dark, vast, huge clouds that cover the sky, who thunder and roar, and which deposits huge amounts of water right across the land. And this water drops on the earth, it fills up the tiny little cracks in the ground. This fills up the little creeks. This, becoming full, fills up the rivers. This fills up the lakes. This fills up the great rivers that flow all the way down to the ocean. So this is an image of abundance, of prosperity. When it rains, things can grow. When you give, you're encouraging people to grow. You grow. You grow in the Dhamma. You help others with the things that they need. Sometimes your act of generosity will make a huge amount of difference to someone else. And we know that image of the water leading to the ocean, the Buddha doesn't say this, I'm just going to add this bit in. We know that water in the ocean gets evaporated up into the clouds and comes over and rains again, right? This is that positive feedback loop that comes from generosity. When we are kind and generous, we reflect upon it and we get the benefits in our meditation in terms of joy, rapture, tranquility, bliss, stillness and samadhi, with the potential for wisdom to grow. So this is why this is such a powerful practice. The Chaganusati is found in several places throughout the suttas, and in the Mahanama Sutta, the Buddha gives a short statement on how we should reflect upon our generosity. And so I'll use this as the basis for our practice today. But the important thing in this practice is that you allow yourself to feel good about your generosity. So I meet a lot of Reformed Christians in Australia who feel guilty about feeling good about their kindness, because pride is a sin. And so in Buddhism, we don't have this hang-up. We don't have this problem. When we practice generosity, we're allowed to feel good about our actions. So I just want to give you permission at the beginning to feel good. And the next thing we need to do is to allow for joy to arise in our mind. And don't have any expectations. It may not happen for you today. But I want also just to give you permission, allow yourself to open to this possibility of experiencing some happiness, some spiritual happiness in your practice. For a lot of people, that's actually really hard. Maybe we've done a lot of kind of Vipassana style practice where we're really cutting off our emotions, but the Buddha frequently talked about developing these wholesome and positive mind states that are pleasurable and happy, and that these are essential for our meditation practice to grow. So allow yourself to smile, allow yourself to feel good, allow yourself to be okay with celebrating a beautiful thing that you have done kindness and generosity in this world. So let's take a comfortable posture and let's close our eyes. We're going to take a few minutes just to settle in. So again, finding that place of comfort and ease in the body by relaxing, softening, allowing yourself to feel comfortable. And allowing yourself to come into this present by letting go of the world outside, letting go of the morning and the day. Just allow yourself to be here, now. To be aware, mindful, but relaxed and comfortable. Allow the mind to settle, to become calm, to become peaceful. And we use this mindfulness, this calm, quiet, peaceful mind to begin our practice of Chaganussati, recollecting our generosity. You are a good person. You are a kind person. You are a generous person. You are. You are. Every day, in so many ways, you have practiced generosity. Perhaps you've given a birthday present. Maybe you've donated to charity. Cooked someone a meal. Gave some money to the homeless. Offered robes to the monks. You have been kind. You have been generous and giving. Or perhaps you've volunteered your time, done some Dhamma service, helped others. Maybe you've given your seat up on the train for someone who needed it more. Maybe you gave the gift of time being there for someone, listening to someone, maybe you gave a smile on the street, a nod of appreciation, or perhaps you had a generous thought, gave someone the benefit of the doubt. In many ways, you have given. You are a kind and generous person. You are. You are. And how wonderful that is. How amazing. How fortunate for you. How wonderful. How amazing. How fortunate that in this world, full of selfish, miserly people, how wonderful that you are free from miserliness. How fortunate that you are a kind and generous person. So allow yourself to feel good. Give yourself a little smile. I am a kind and generous person. How wonderful. How fortunate. How amazing that you are letting go of selfishness, miserliness. And this will always lead to good results. And so reflecting now upon a time that you were generous, a time that you gave, remembering it clearly, remembering the inspiration, seeing it in your mind. And when you gave, what was that like? How did you feel? And after you gave, how was that? And recollecting this now, feel good, feel happy, feel joy. You are a kind and generous person. Wonderful. And a very special feeling connected with this generosity, a feeling of gladness, a feeling of joy, goodness. Connected with the Dhamma, what is wholesome and good, that leads to happiness, to bliss, to nibbana. See if you can find this joy inside yourself. See if you can feel glad. Allow your mind to be happy. And so practice in this way for the next 10 minutes, recollecting times that you've been generous, being inspired, perhaps experiencing a feeling of joy. Or just pondering the beauty of generosity. So practice in this way for the next 10 minutes. How wonderful it is that in this world, full of selfishness and miserliness, that I am someone who has given. Delighting in generosity. And so as we come towards the end of the practice, taking a few moments to review, how was that for you? How did it feel recollecting your acts of generosity? Was it easy? Was it hard? What was the feeling connected with generosity in your mind? Did you experience gladness or joy? And so now you can relax your awareness, coming back to the room, and arise from the meditation. So this is the practice of Chaga Nus Sati. Have any of you practiced it before? First time? So it's a really nice practice. So sometimes when we practice this the first time, it can be quite challenging, quite difficult. We might not get any experience of joy. And you might think, this isn't for me, this kind of practice. But as you know, with all of our meditation, it takes time, and we develop this muscle of meditation. And so you might find, if you practice again, that you get a real sense of inspiration and joy appearing in the mind. And a lot of people who I've taught this meditation practice to report that sometimes it can become really quick, that they just turn their mind to this act of generosity and the joy appears very quickly because they've trained their mind in this way. And this is how the Buddha actually encouraged us to practice, that we use these anusatis to inspire the mind. So when we're feeling dull, drowsy, or agitated and restless in our meditation, the Buddha encouraged us to use these practices to inspire the mind, to get the energy and joy back into the mind. And so this is a skillful means. So if you're on a retreat or doing some meditation in your own time, and you find that the mind is starting to fade, then you can use a practice like Buddhanusati or Dhammanusati or Sanghanusati or Charganusati, recollecting your generosity, to re-inspire and reinvigorate your practice, and then return to your main meditation object, such as the breath. And so generosity is a powerful spiritual tool. And the Buddha said that we develop it as an ornament for our mind and a requisite, something that's essential for our mind. And so this is how we can think of generosity in our own practice. It's something so beautiful and it's essential for us to have on the spiritual path. So that's just a short session on Charganusati and the practice of generosity, and I offer it to you, hoping that it may be of some benefit to you in your practice. And sadhu, sadhu, sadhu for coming along, hearing the Dharma and practicing it today. You know, one of the questions that you're all thinking but no one's saying is, what about mixed intentions? Mixed intentions with giving. Like, what if we're expecting something back, or we want to please someone because we want them to like us? Is that okay? What do you think? So it's okay. The most important thing is to give, right? So the most important thing is to not be selfish, not to be miserly. So at the beginning of our practice, sure, maybe we have this mixed giving. It could be that we are giving because we have an expectation of the result. We give holding on to some sort of expectation. We might give thinking, oh, this will get me to heaven, I better give. Or we might give thinking, well, this is what my parents told me to do. I have to give. So we give. Or we might think, I'll give and then I'll meditate on it later. That's still like this investment, right? And so this is from a sutta in the Anguttara Nikaya 7s, where the Buddha says, yes, look, it's okay to give with these mixed blessings. Mixed intentions. But the best form of giving, he said, was just because it's an adornment, an ornament for the mind and essential for the mind as a practice. So this is the best way to give. But all those other forms, those mixed forms of giving, they're okay because we're not being selfish, we're not being miserly, we're still benefiting others and benefiting ourselves. And it's likely that when we give, it will be slightly mixed. So don't hesitate to give out of fear that your intention is not pure enough. Just give. Get into the habit of giving, get into the habit of being generous, and soon you'll find that whenever you give, it's just like an automatic thing. It's a kind of beautiful muscle that you've developed. When someone asks, you give. You don't hold on, because you've been working against that tendency towards selfishness and miserliness and greed, and you've been cultivating letting go. So you've gotten into really good habit by giving. So it's much better to give than to not give, even if it's slightly mixed. Does that help anyone who had a question that they were a bit shy about asking? Yes?
What about the opposite? So you're pressured or expected to give, but you don't feel like giving.
Yeah, don't give then.
Then it plays on the mind. Should I have given? Should I not given?
Yeah. So I think when we feel pressured like that, it's not healthy, is it? It's not good. It's not that inspiration that we want. Sure, you can give, but you feel dirty about it, right? And so afterwards, you're also going to feel dirty about it. You're going to be like, oh, well, I didn't even want to do that. And now I'm supposed to feel good about it. Now I'm supposed to recollect my generosity, but I didn't even want to. And so actually, I think if we feel pressured like that, then it's not essential that we give at that time, because we might feel resentment, and that resentment will stick, and we won't want to practice giving again. I mean, sit with it, see how you go. Like, you might be able to just, you know, if you're feeling a bit pressured, like everyone has to chip in at the office for someone's birthday cake and you don't like them, sit with that. Maybe you can work through that and you end up giving and you feel good, you know? Or if it's like you turn up to the temple and everyone else is whipping out like 100 ringgit and you're like, oh, I haven't got that, I don't want to give that much. Don't feel obliged to do that. And remember also, I don't think this is said enough, but we should remember that giving is not just monetary. And it's kind of a shame that that's kind of our first way of thinking about it. It's the first way I think about it, and I'm a monk, I don't have any money. So we have to remember that giving, generosity, is not just about money. Let's not limit ourselves. So if you don't want to give someone money, like a homeless person, a lot of people, this is another question that comes up all the time. If you don't want to give homeless people money, give them a drink or give them some food. Don't let yourself be stopped from giving in that way. Or if you don't want to come to the monastery and give donation, do a little bit of sweeping around the place so that you can still feel good. So service is good. Offering other things apart from money is good. Offering time, energy, listening. There's so many ways that we can give, so many ways to be generous. So don't limit it just to money. But yeah, if you feel pressured or obliged, sit with it for a bit, see how you feel about it, and you might decide to go ahead. You can reconcile yourself to it. But if you don't, then it's okay. It's not great to give if you feel pressured. It's not a gift, you know. It's an obligation, which isn't good. One last question.
What do you think of a person who donates the whole fortune to, let's say, a monastery at the expense of her own family? So the whole fortune goes to the family. This is in the news.
Yes, I saw that, yeah.
And the daughter is in debt, and she doesn't give a cent to the daughter, nor to her parents. So what do you say to that? And it's very confusing, for me anyway.
Yeah, so I guess everyone has the right to do with their money as they wish. However, it is good to look after people also. You know, I guess with this, because it's a nun, right? We're talking about a Buddhist nun who had a fortune and she gave it away. So she might have been erring on the side of caution, thinking that she shouldn't give to those who are closest to her, because she's trying to develop this boundless mind of generosity and love to all beings, and that she didn't want to give it. I don't know the full story, but yeah, look, I think it's much better to give, certainly without discrimination, and that's like a kind of good and a bad thing. Like, without discrimination means, you give to people whoever asks. You don't favour certain people. I don't know the situation of this family, but I imagine that there's some sort of backstory there. So there could be a reason. Whether it's skillful of her to do this or not, I'm not sure. But generally, I think it's much better to give, as my teacher Ajahn Brahm says, with a warm heart rather than a cold hand. And so we might be tempted to do things in a really cold, detached manner, but where that inspiration lies is the most important thing. We shouldn't wait until we're dead to give. We don't know what will happen once we're dead, if our children will look after the will that we've made in the way that we want them to. We can't see the results of our actions when we're dead. We don't know that it's being completed. And so we should give while we've got the money to give here and now, and we can see the benefit of our generosity. But yeah, it's a difficult situation. I think everyone will have a different opinion. But anyway. I guess we can't really judge what's going on, but I imagine that there must be some sort of story there. Yeah.
Because I really thought that Buddha's teaching is to always take care of the family first, right? And any leftovers, then you can give to charity of your choice.
That's right. So the Buddha
first.
says that we have 4 blisses as householders. We have the bliss of getting money, the bliss of using that money to look after our family. We have the bliss of anavajja sukha, the bliss of blamelessness. But for monastic, I'm not sure, they've kind of left the family life, they've left behind those sorts of obligations. And yeah, so I'm not sure. She donated it to a monastery. So she's looking at this kind of big picture of how that money can benefit all. And we actually find people doing this anyway, like leaving money to the cats or leaving money to the hospital or whatever. Not just Buddhist monks and nuns who kind of might do this kind of thing. Yeah, who knows? It's sad to hear that the daughter is in debt. But who put her into debt? I guess this is what her mother's... I don't know. Look, anyways, I don't want to get involved. Sorry. Let's chat about that later. You had a quick question before we finish up, is that right?
This morning on my way to the temple, This morning on the way to the temple, I was at the bus stop. While waiting for the bus, I saw an elderly lady and with 2 policemen. I thought she needed help because the policemen were interrogating her. She had a lot of money in a little book. Not little book, a book. When they flipped the book, there was a lot of money. And then, I don't know what she said to the policeman, but after a while, the policeman said, this should be stored in the bank. And then the policeman went off. Immediately after the policeman has gone off, she came and asked me for some money. So in my mind, I have a monkey mind. I was thinking, you have a lot of money, more than me. I don't have much money. And you're asking me for money? I said, no. Then she went back to the seat and she sat down. So I was thinking to myself, I said, she asked, I have still the prerogative to give more or give less. What's wrong with me? So I walk over and I just flip up my bag and I took some money out. And I only had $1 because the others is $50. And I said, for you. And she gave me a beautiful smile, wished me a very good day. And she took the money and she put it in the whole pile of money that she had in the book. And I was just stunned. She don't feel anything. She just felt that, you gave me the money, I thank you for the money, and I put it into my bag. I have loads, and I smile, and I keep the money back into my bag. So as I was walking here, I was thinking to myself, what did I do? Searching in my mind, there should be no discrimination, like you said just now. In my mind, I was thinking about that. And I was a little bit hustled and troubled when I was walking in here. I said, I need the money myself, but, then I thought to myself, maybe she needed it for something else. She's trying to accumulate the money for something big or some other things. And I could deal with that. I could accept that.
Yeah.
Then I told myself too, the other thing is that I gave the money away. I wish her well. Whatever she does with it has got nothing else to do with me.
That's right, yeah. That's
So
good.
I could meditate.
And the Buddha said that when we give, we kind of delight in giving to whoever asks. And that for me, I think a lot of us, that's really hard. That's really hard. If someone asks, we give. And so the Buddha set a very high standard. So we might not be there all the time or at this moment, but that's the kind of non-discriminating the Buddha said that we can cultivate through this practice of generosity. And it's similar to something like love. Sometimes it's hard for us to give love. Sometimes we hesitate. But the Buddha said love is for all. Like, we love all beings without discrimination. So these are hard practices sometimes for us to get our minds around. So it's much better, even if we don't feel like we're 100% there, that we still practice whatever we can, even if it's mixed, even if it's not perfect, because that's what's going to get us to that stage. Not practicing is not going to help us get there. Anyway, so it's time for me to go for the Sangha's meal. I don't want to miss. So enjoy your lunch. I'll see you back here at 1:30. Sadhu.